Alright, we're back again for more of the, whatever this is, the sissy hour. He's a bit of a sissy, isn't he? This kind of stuff, and talks like, yeah, it's a little... Anyway. Yeah, that was rude, Gary. Yeah, but see, there's places you're allowed to do that kind of stuff. Like, say if you're just sick of the tranny thing, you're sick of it, you can make videos, you can do lots of things on your time. Okay, to say, fuck you, tranny. You get a T-shirt that says "fuck you, tranny." Lots of things you can do, but in the real world where people have to rent apartments and get jobs and all of that kind of stuff, well, you have to take it a little more seriously. That's all. Not that big of a deal. Really isn't. I hope they're not going to talk about this shit the whole show. It's really going to start to suck.
And also in terms of their interests, they're more different in Scandinavia than they are anywhere else in the world.
Then what have they done to try to flatten things out, as you said?
Well, they've transformed their social policies so that men and women have as close to equal opportunity, say, as any society has managed. But that hasn't produced the hoped-for equality of outcome. Quite contrary, in many situations, it's exaggerated it. You could say...
Well, look, yeah, they can't fix the thing that women have the babies and men don't. So they can't fix that little bit of inequality. Right, and it's going to take a while before people start raising girls not to be girls, and that's part of the problem. I don't know if you raise a boy to be a boy, but you know what I mean. I don't know if you do. It's kind of a tricky question. I mean, it seems like the girl thing has got more features to it than, more infrastructure than the boy thing necessarily. I think
that's actually okay. Is that what you want? What you want is to have a society where the genuine differences between people are free to manifest themselves. So, for example, if you
right, and there's no non-freedom for that to happen. There's just some sort of recognition that you're not going to do this stuff overnight. So you got to give it a good shot. You got to give this making humans human thing a good shot. For us to grow out of these stupid traditions. So it's just kind of silly to say, well, we've tried hard enough, no more trying necessary. No, I think we could. I think there's nothing. You can see that with every year there's more and more progress, and some of the progress doesn't look like progress to me. Okay, I don't want to watch women have boxing matches. I mean, it doesn't do anything for me. I mean, it does something for some guys, but yeah, it doesn't do anything for me. And I don't want women farting and belching and acting like pigs, but I want them to feel the liberty to be so if that's who they are. So yeah, a little more patience, fuckers.
You have 3 or 4 kids. Say the kids are going to be different from one another genetically. That's why they're not identical twins. They differ genetically. And if you set the environment up so that each child is supported, the children actually turn out quite differently. Now, if you're an absolute brute and you beat them and you abuse them, then they'll all turn out the same because there's tremendous environmental influence on them. But if you form an individual relationship with each of them and allow them...
I bet you didn't have any siblings. Yeah, you sound like a little only child. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
...strengths to manifest themselves as they will in a supportive environment, then the kids are going to turn out very different. And so a free society is actually one that produces massive...
So there's just no real point to talk about freedom, right? Because you're just basically illustrating perfectly that it's all programming. And that what we really should be having a conversation about, instead of this silly nonsense, is maybe a conversation about how that there are certain necessities to building character in human beings and integrity, and giving them the option to be all kinds of things, and not being controlled by their environment or stupid television or stupid things like that. And all kids need feeding, even the ones in the ghetto. They all need feeding. They all need to be dragged to the historical landmarks, and that all that can be done in a way that I think is gives them a sense of connection to their society. I didn't get that in there was none of that in the see, it's all ritualistic. There's saluting the flag and doing your silly pledging stuff, but there's no sense that you actually belong, that you're actually valued by the nation, that you're actually valued by the community. No sense of that at all. And that's what's, it does kind of take a village to raise a child. I mean, I hate that sap, but the truth is, we're not raising humans to be part of the human community. We're raising them to be selfish, insecure, paranoid, isolated, jerks. Thank you.
Unequal outcomes because it allows the genuine differences between people to manifest themselves. These people who are pushing...
Okay, the genuine differences between people to manifest themselves. Again, what do these genuine differences have to do with? The crudest of our biological functions. And we've already recognized that those crude functions have to be completely moderated, where we don't walk around naked, we don't expose our desire. We have to put all of that stuff in the right place at the right time. So we live completely unnatural lives. So it's kind of silly to talk about we should be liberated to be the natural human that we are. Because that isn't going to work in the world we live in. It's not even going to come close to working. Can't work.
Which is equality of outcome. That's what the word equity codes for, by the way, equality of outcome and not equality of opportunity. I don't know.
Well, again, this whole concept of creating equal opportunity is just nice words. But again, how do you do that as a practical matter? I mean, you're probably a defender of inheritance wealth. How right away it's already broken. You've already failed dismally.
What in the world they do with regards to the fact that a very large number of professions are, high quality, high paid professions are female dominated. Physicians, for example, psychologists, any of the disciplines that have to do with human care are almost inevitably dominated by women, and that's increasingly the case. Is it we're supposed to stop that? Is that also a sign of oppression? We're going to force women to do things they're not interested in?
Well, there's also a very disingenuous...
Well, again, that's really, there's no one even suggesting that anywhere, is there? No, I mean, the whole point is to give women the power to be these things, and the more and more there are these things, the more and more women will grow up seeing that they can have vital roles as a human rather than just a baby maker.
way of framing it here in America, where people consistently, even the President of the United States, Obama, was talking about income inequality. And the way they frame income inequality, they talk about the 79 cents to the dollar. But what they don't discuss is that we're talking about completely different careers. We're not. The way they frame it, they frame it as if two people are working side by side. One is a man, one is a woman. They're both doing the same job. The man makes $1, the woman makes 79 cents. Yeah. That is not the case.
Well, it's typical of ideological...
Well, again, so these are your arguments about what your life experience is even. So maybe that's the way he sees it. Maybe that's the world he's seen. I obviously didn't see that world. I saw a world for most of my life where I saw very competent women being paid not just 3/4 of what a man was paid, but 1/4 of what a man was paid. And I've even seen it in my own life in the sense that I've had circumstances where I was paid a lot less than somebody else because they had kids. And the rationale was, well, they have a family to support. Therefore, they have to be paid more. What? How is that my problem? It's not my problem they decide to have kids.
Conversation, because what happens technically, like imagine that at the end we talked about poverty a few minutes ago and we said, well, there's many reasons that one person might have more money than another.
Yes, the inheritance is the #1 way to have more money than everyone else. #1 way to do it. #1 on the list. Inherit it.
There are many reasons why women might make less money on average than men. There are small businesses that women run, for example, make far less money than small businesses that men run. But that's partly because a lot of women run their businesses part-time because they have kids. It's also partly because men do all the horrible, dangerous jobs, the ones where there's a high chance of dying. Men are much more likely to work outside. Men are much more likely to move in pursuit of a career opportunity. There are lots of reasons that men and women get.
Yes, I know. There are physical differences, but again, the argument being made is there's lots of women doing these kinds of jobs now because they do have the physical ability to do the job. And there's nothing wrong with that happening, and I don't think it's all that draconian, the little bit of effort that's been made to encourage people to find what they're comfortable being. What's so horrible? Where is it so horrible? What's the horrible thing you're afraid of here? What horrible force is just making your life so miserable that you have to bitch and complain like this? What is it?
For in terms of their income, but if you're an ideologue, you can only handle one variable. Oh, men and women measured en masse don't have the same incomes, therefore the system is corrupt. Right. Jesus, how much thinking does it take to come up with a theoretical scenario like that? It's so boneheaded.
Oh, right. And it's not something that's out of tradition. So if we found out how much money gets inherited, right? How much goes to the first son versus the first daughter, that kind of thing. We're not going to find any gross inequities. Oh, I think we are.
And it just pushes the ideological, it just pushes the ideology forward with no thought.
Now, as a professor, why is this sort of objective reasoning and really absolutely honest assessment of this situation, why is it so rare amongst professors?
Yeah, and what's your honest assessment of the situation? That somehow there hasn't been a historical problem and there's not a present problem because you say any inequity that exists, women deserve it. Okay, they deserve the liability of being the one who has to get pregnant, and generally speaking, it's the man who gets away from his responsibilities. Okay, it's the one who escapes. It's not the men who want the kids and want the responsibility. The 9 cases out of 10 cases, the man doesn't want the responsibility and doesn't take responsibility, and the woman's left holding bags and liabilities and being less capable of borrowing money and all of those things. Those aren't real factual circumstances. So you're just going to pretend those facts don't exist and that women are treated exactly the way they should be. Yeah, sure. You suck.
Why is this so rare in universities? Why is this such an unusual subject?
Because I guess professors are generally speaking smarter than I think they are. Yeah, I guess. I don't think they're very bright, but it seems like some of them might have something going for them then.
Well, I think the reason is that when people first encounter a complex topic, like,
right, okay, so he's saying it's complex, and yet he just grossly simplified it. So just recognize that fact, right? He just made a gross simplification. Yes, there might be statistical indicators of inequity, but they're all deserved. Women deserve it. That wasn't a gross simplification. And yet he thinks he's doing something complicated. Yeah.
income differences. It's like, imagine you were drawing a map of a territory, and you don't know the territory very well. The first thing you do is just roughly sketch out the shapes of the continents. And maybe you're wrong, like the early European maps of North America. You know, you kind of get one coastline right, and you guess, and the rest it's blurry and gray. And then, as you investigate...
Well, this isn't exactly the screenplay of a blockbuster movie, is it? Let's draw continents and see if they can make them look like... Oh.
More and more, your picture of the situation becomes higher and higher and higher and higher in resolution. It's hard to go from a low-resolution representation to a high-resolution representation. And ideologies are low-resolution representations.
I would say it's exactly the opposite. Okay? Ideologies are after you read Karl Marx, you see, are after you study a few, economic charts and the traditions of the Fed. Like, I could go on a whole thing about the Fed, right? All your types will sit there and say something like, oh, it's a conspiracy, the Fed did it, the Fed. And then I could show, man, no, the Fed doesn't have anything to do with any of this crap. They just do what the government basically says do. They're a servant of the institution. And that, the whole idea of printed money is not really printed because it never gets into circulation.
So the thing about low-resolution representation is it looks like it covers everything. But it doesn't. It goes...
Yes, right. So again, you can just keep saying that they're not thinking as well as I am, when maybe it's you who's not thinking hard enough. It's not really a good argument. It's probably one of those fallacy arguments, the argument from I say so or something. I say you're stupid, or I say you're low resolution. Yeah, it's probably a fallacy of some kind.
So you look, the more details there are. If you get a 3-year-old to draw a helicopter, they put like a little cross on the top and a circle and a stick and another circle, and that's the helicopter. Well, when you look at it, that's a helicopter. But no one would expect that thing to fly. If you want to change that into a real model of a helicopter, you have to increase your focus and concentration on every single element of it. Right,
and then you have to pay attention to that. Well, Castro was selling the blood of the people he shot in the firing squad. And, of course, those people deserve to have their blood in their body when they were bulldozed into the trench. And it's completely insane to suck the blood out of dead people. See, that is like forest in a tree thing. Okay? You're sitting there, looking at a banana tree over there, and the forest is over there, idiot. Fuckhead. Numbnuts.
The entity, and that takes a tremendous amount of cognitive effort. And sometimes you don't even know what you don't know about something. You know, I could say, well...
Oh, yes. Well, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Yes, and the don't-knowers don't know. Well, let me write that down. The don't-knowers don't know. And they don't know that they don't know. So the don't-knowers don't know, and they don't know that they don't know. Wow. Okay. Put that in my pocket for later.
There are 50 reasons why men and women's income differ. Well, that doesn't mean I can say all 50 of those differences. And each of those 50 differences are fragmentable into maybe another dozen categories each. Maybe there's 600 reasons why men and women's salary differ. But you have to spend a tremendous amount of time paying attention and thinking to build your model of reality into that level of resolution. And basically what you do is default to temperamentally influenced ideologies. They give you a one-bit answer to everything. Why do men and women's salaries differ? Oppression. It's always the same thing. And it makes...
Well, you know, whatever. I mean, tradition is the same thing, right? You could just use tradition as a word for oppression in the sense that there's a double standard or an unfair standard or cheats. One side's cheating a little. And that maybe you can level the playing field a little bit. But again, you can't fix a problem until the rest of society recognizes a problem. So they got to quit raising girls to be girls. You know, if they want them to be humans. So if we just keep raising people to be narrow in their focus, then instead of capable, I mean, it's that whole thing. You want to prepare people to a point when they're able to make their own decisions, that they haven't closed doors and they have lots of options, and we're not doing enough of that.
It makes you feel like you know something, and people like that because they don't like the feeling that there's something they don't know. They don't like to be in chaos. That's basically chaos. They like to be in order, and order is where you know everything. So, and professors are no different than people, obviously, given that they're people. Maybe they're more intelligent on average. They're also more sheltered, I would say, in many ways on average. And they're also...
Yes, and I'd say you're more pooftier than average. You know, you're probably more poofter than the average. So what? Oh, that's right. You're making some sort of argument that they're wrong because you're right. Oh, I forgot. Continue.
Not challenged as often.
Tenure. Tenure's an...
Oh, tenure. Well, I have tenure and I like it, so I'm not going to say anything bad about that.
issue, and also not competing in the marketplace, not being in the workforce, going from being in high school to being in universities to getting a degree to teaching to being a professor to getting tenure, staying inside of that intellectual bubble.
You know, it's complicated. Often these things happen. They're like...
Yes, because that's exactly my life. Yes, you just outed me completely.
Positive feedback loops, you know, when you bring a speaker too close to, or a microphone too close to a speaker and it starts to howl. And I think something like that's happened in universities, is that they started to tilt towards the left in the 60s. And then as they tilted harder. And then as they tilted harder, they tilted even harder until all of the diversity was forced out of the universities. And I don't know if it's so much a consequence of the actual policies of the university as just a feedback process that got out of control.
Yes, well, the pop culture kind of drives that stuff too. So, you know, it probably comforts the intelligentsia to think they're bigger than. So they're trying to show how they're bigger people than the commoners. So they try to have some sort of idealism and, you know, some sort of Disney World, Disneyland kind of vision for the future thing. And it's often just fairy mush. So you could just call it maybe hippie syndrome. But, yeah, I would concede the point. I don't even know why colleges even get into this whole... Why this was ever an issue in the first place, of these colleges becoming somehow political institutions, when it just doesn't have any credibility as a political institution. You know, in my opinion. Yeah.
Even if it's 50% liberals and 50% conservatives, no problem. But if it's 70% liberals and 30%...
yeah, well, and the other way around is, you know, Liberty University or something. You know, 99% Christian lunatic and the rest are janitors or something, right? That's it. So, yes, segregation is a problem. And that's what universities become. is, you know, segregated to an ideology, comfort among they're looking to seek inspiration. They're seeking muses. They're seeking people who will facilitate them to become part of a movement and to make the world a better place, let's say, or to make us all rich. But they'll have a common ideological theme. And it makes perfectly good sense that you would go places where you're going to be stimulated to fight and to get engaged, not a place where you're going to keep getting barraged by the idiots and the idiocracy and the fools and the fucktards. I mean, if I had to live at at Liberty University and just had to be surrounded by that stupidity 24/7, that would make somebody fucking insane.
Conservatives. Maybe it rapidly goes to 99% liberals and 1% conservatives.
Is that what it's like right now? I mean, when you look at the University of Toronto, where you are, what is the number, if you had to guess?
Well, it would depend to some degree on the discipline, but professors are also tend to be characterized by personality traits that do tilt them towards liberalism. They're higher in trait openness, which is both creativity and interest in ideas. So that's one of the things that temperamentally distinguishes liberals from conservatives. Conservatives are more conscientious. They're more orderly and industrious. Liberals are more open, so they're more interested in aesthetics and ideas. And
whatever those. So those pigeonholes kind of stink. Yeah. I think you ought to just go by what's rational and what's selfish. Those are two good categories. Selfish and rational.
of course, being interested in aesthetics and ideas does tilt you towards an academic career. It's hard to tell. I mean, certainly the bulk of intellectuals are liberal and liberal left. Virtually.
Well, liberal meaning they're not for insane religious tyranny, and they're not for laws against homosexuality or something, and they're not for all of that kind of fascism of traditional fascism.
All of them, I would say, and that's probably not as true. We know this. It's not as true in the hard sciences. But in the social sciences and the humanities, it's the overwhelming majority. Yeah, well,
what's the odds of like that stupid guy who ran for president, right? A brain surgeon who doesn't believe in evolution. What's the odds of that? That's a certain kind of crazy you're not gonna be able to manufacture too easily.
I mean, I can see that even in this battle that I've been in Canada with regards to Bill C-16 and these compelled pronouns. I had almost no support from my faculty colleagues. Now, I didn't expect any. I mean, and I'm not shocked by that, but it's an indication that if you put to them a choice between social justice / all-consuming compassion and freedom of expression, they're going to tilt hard towards the social justice compassion end of things.
But it almost seemed like when I was watching some of the debates that you've engaged in, it almost seems like they're politicians. It almost seems like they're wetting their finger and going with the breeze. There's some conversations that you had that were just, I had to stop and rewind them because I couldn't believe the arguments. There was a woman, I don't know, was it a transgender man that you were having a discussion with that was saying that there's no biological difference in the sexes?
Yeah, no biological difference. He said that the scientific consensus for the last 4... I'm not sure. I don't believe so. He was a professor who taught transgender studies at the University of Toronto. And yeah, he said outright that there were no biological differences between men and women and that was the scientific consensus. He believed that he had the qualifications to say that because he was a...
Well, whatever. That doesn't even sound like it could be true. I mean, obviously there's some biological differences. So I'm thinking the vocabulary was something different than that. But go ahead with it. So, I mean, that's anecdotal. So, yes, of course, every cause has some crazies in it. So what can I say? I mean, if somebody doesn't recognize that there's a genetic chromosome, okay, that defines your sex, yeah, that's pretty stupid.
Historian of medicine, which hardly qualifies as a scientist. Not that you have to be a scientist to notice that there are biological differences between men and women. It was very bizarre for me at that point in the last few months because I was under substantial pressure from the university to stop repeating my claim that I wouldn't use compelled pronouns to refer to people because the university regarded that as against the university policies and also against the Ontario Human Rights Code, so also illegal. And as my employers, they're responsible for everything I say, whether or not there has been a complaint made, whether or not the consequence of my speech is intended or unintended, because that's built into the legislation. And believe me,
right, so he won't acknowledge somebody's right not to be a Mr. or a Mrs. or a Ms. So if you don't want to be one of those things, he's not going to respect you. That's kind of rude.
That's coming your way because this legislation spreads like mad. But on the one hand, I got 2 letters of warning from the university for refusing to use these compelled pronouns, which I regard as the ideological constructions of radical left-wingers. And this professor went on...
Okay, ideological construction of radical left-wingers. So again, this is somehow, you know, the definition of what it is to be left. So, you know, that's how myopic all of this has gotten, or whatever it is closed-minded or something. I mean, Donald Trump got elected not for anything except the immigrant issue, right? Because a lot of liberals don't buy into this whole thing that every immigrant's a good immigrant. And he took advantage of that. But that's one subject. I mean, a lot of the people who voted for Donald Trump are going to figure out, you know, as they see what happens, that, oh shit, that's not what I voted for.
Agenda, this Ontario news show, and announced publicly that there are no biological differences between men and women. It's like, huh, you'd think maybe the university would have had something to say about that, since they do, in fact, have a biology department. But, oh no, that went by without notice. That was perfectly fine.
It's such an insane thing to say. If there's no biological difference, then why are they taking hormones?
Well, that's a good question. Why bother with the surgery, and especially the hormones?
Yeah.
Because that's not, like, you could argue with surgery that that's cosmetic, right?
Yeah, this person, whoever this professor was, is an expert in transgender studies.
Nicholas Matt.
I'm pretty sure that used to be a woman, or she, they. You're not allowed to say that. If you say that, you're a bad person. If you say they. And they and them is the most...
Yeah, why is it that... Why are you finding that so difficult? I mean, yes, you don't call a human being an it. You know, what, they? That's too hard for you? They?
Most reasonable of these pronouns, these alternative pronouns, they and them. Like, you could say, if you know a guy and he doesn't know how to swim, they should probably stay out of the pool.
Right.
You could say that. You could use that in a non-plural form.
Yes, and they is used to repair awkward sentences, basically, but it's never been used, despite the claims of the gender bender activists. It's never been used for the singular, and we
gender bender activists. So again, this is all about is the fact that it's like converting to metric or something. You know, no, we can't do without our tradition of being labeled he and she. That's it. We have to carry that label. Why? Why are you so glued to it? Is there some issue? Are you somehow insecure? I mean, you do have some feminine characteristics, so you know, maybe this is all about you and the fact that you're insecure in your masculinity, and so you have to make sure that everybody calls you a he, because you're afraid that there's an ambiguity there, that somebody might be confused. Is that it? Yeah. That's sort of a fallacious argument. The argument from, you know, cheap ridicule. But anyway, it's fun anyway.
We shouldn't give up the distinction. We shouldn't give up the distinction between the plural and the singular.
No,
we actually need to know whether it's one person or more than one person.
Do you think it's reasonable for people that are asexual, people that really are uncomfortable with the idea of being a man or a woman, is it reasonable that we come up with a distinction for that? I mean, that seems like it would be nice, and this is one of the things that you said. One of the things that you don't like about this is that you're being compelled to use these made-up pronouns, and that if we as a society, as a culture, as a civilization, sort of adopt a new phrase, that you would be fine with that.
We kind of had one. We had transsexual.
Yeah, but
I know.
That's problematic because it's not asexual. You know, transsexual would be transition. And here's the other distinction. This is another important thing.
Well, again, why? The whole point is that this whole thing goes away if you just quit worrying about your sex. Just quit worrying about it. Why do you need to have a possessive term that identifies you as I'm with Schwarzenegger, or you know, I'm with whatever, Fanny. What is the difference? Why is this so important to you? Just recognize that maybe we are just lighten up and just quit paying any fucking attention to any of these orientations and just say, who the fuck cares? As long as the costume you're wearing doesn't knock over other people's chairs, who cares? Be a Godzilla. Who cares? Just don't do it too insanely.
Those aren't the people that have the problem with it. The people that have the problem with these pronouns, the transsexual community almost entirely, or at least, I shouldn't say entirely, but predominantly prefer the alternative pronoun. Yeah, right. A male to female transgender person prefers to be called a woman or she and use the female pronouns.
Yes,
male,
the whole point.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's some tiny fraction of the transsexual community, or we could say there's some tiny fraction of people who are identifying themselves with the transgender community, which is already a tiny fraction, who claims that they have an identity that doesn't fit into either binary category.
Right.
Well, it's a proposition.
Right, so why just, that's exactly a good point to just say, why fuck with this at all? Why fuck with it? Just let it go. Just tell everybody you can't wear this shit on your sleeves anymore, okay? If people can recognize you as something, fine. They're allowed to have an opinion of what you are. And but they have no obligation. We have no obligation to refer to anything as that female or that male. Just let go of that shit.
That I think bears some scrutiny to begin with, because I don't believe that the claims that that tiny community is making are coherent in any sense, because they say, well, you could be man, woman, or neither, or both. Those aren't coherent claims in my estimation. And
well, they're coherent in the sense that we know this is a real world dilemma for people. So why pretend it's not? People spend their working life as one thing. They'll spend their social life as something else. These are real circumstances. So why pretend it's not a real circumstance?
If what they're saying is that we don't fit into a category and therefore we get to invent our own plurality of categories, it's not logically tenable. That isn't how it works, because you get an infinite number of categories out of that. And that's what's happening already online.
One of my favorite...
Well, online. And it's really troublesome online, because I go to these communities and I interact with these people, and I can't keep all of the different acronyms sorted. I don't think there's any obligation to do any of this. The obligation is to just forget about worrying about Mr. and Mrs. on every form that exists, because it's not fucking relevant to anything that matters.
Stories came out of an all-girls university in Massachusetts, where a group of women, they were trying to pick a president of the student body or whatever, and one of the girls who went to that school decided that she identified as a man, so she changed her name, and I don't believe there's any hormones or anything involved. I think she just changed her name. She called herself masculine of center, genderqueer, changed her name to a masculine name, ran for president of whatever the hell this is.
I think it was Wilson.
Won. Yes, I believe you're right. Won, and then was denounced by the rest of the class, because now she was a white male, so she was a part of the patriarchy, and she was a part of the whole problem with society, and that she should not be allowed, or he should not be allowed to take that position, which
well, that's a really good example.
We read it on air, and I couldn't stop laughing.
Right. Well, that's a really good example of it.
Right. So it's all, just take the most bizarre things that happen, right? So it's, again, there's whatever, hundreds of millions of people in America, and let's go find the silliest people in America, put them on the news every night, and say we've done our job to identify what it is to be alive on planet Earth. I mean, it's just, can't you see after years and years of doing that kind of crap that doesn't get to the truth ever? Ugh, it's just pathetic. Yeah, lots of silly shit happens. People do silly fucking things.
Chaos that ensues when you start to blow apart standard categories. There's a chaos in between categories that's made of an infinite multiplicity. That's why you see, too, with the LGBT rainbow, they're getting caught in their own metaphor. So there's an infinite number of gradations in a rainbow, and there's an infinite number of letters that are accumulating on the LGBT rainbow, and then there's an element of clear...
Well, I don't even think that's good science. I don't think there's any infinite anywhere inside of a rainbow. It's a limited amount of stuff. There's no infinite in there.
Absurdity to that, and one of them is, I believe it's Q+, that includes the other kin types. It's like, well, the claim is, well, I'm marginalized, and then that sort of becomes normalized, and then there's a group right outside of that says, well, I'm marginalized too, and another group says, well, here I am, I'm also marginalized, and there's absolutely no logic. Once you...
Well, I think there's a huge amount of logic to the argument that if we're going to bother doing this thing of where we're going to play this game of I'm a somebody, I'm a sir, I'm a lord, I'm a professor, I'm a doctor, I'm labelable, that, yeah, maybe we should have a bunch of acronyms and things to identify what our political orientations are, not only our sexual orientations, how many venereal diseases we have. Maybe we should just code everything. Everybody have a barcode, and then we can just, with our cameras, we can just, with our phones, just swipe each other's barcodes.
Identified yourself as marginalized. There's no logical way that you can exclude anyone else who regards themselves as marginalized. And so the marginalized, the community of the marginalized expands and expands and expands and expands. And part of the reason for that is that every individual is a multiplicity. And there's an element to every individual that's marginalized. So, for example, it's clearly the case.
Right. So let's all have our own marginalized barcode for all our marginalizednesses. Yeah, fine. Again, how is this so egregious? How exactly? Could you just make a video of your day-to-day life where this just gets in your way so much? Like it happens all the time, like everywhere you go, Dunkin' Donuts, no matter where you go. All these tranny issues, all this crap keeps coming up and just haunting you constantly. Could you show me in your day-to-day life where this just totally unties your shoes, please? Because I just don't get your fucking angst.
that when a child is socialized, there's pros and cons to that. The pros are the socialization turns the little beastly 2-year-old into a 4-year-old that other children can play with. And that does happen between the ages of 2 and 4 if a child is socialized properly. Then what the child does is kind of turn into a clone of everyone else so that he or she can benefit from being able to interact with everyone else.
Oh, so now he's a child psychologist. Yeah, fuck that. Let's see, 2 and 4. Well, see, if you have siblings, then it's automatic. You automatically learn how to interact because you're forced to right from the very beginning. And I had a twin sister, so the interaction deal, understanding that you were not a you and you just had you to worry about, was just never was an issue because there was always that thing, you know, to fight with, or to be on my side. You know, either, you know, it's like you can even see it with cats. You know what I mean? Cats pair up sometimes, and you know, yeah, they swat each other and bat each other, but they end up, you know, tending to help each other out.
Now that builds up a certain amount of individuality because kids learn to talk and they learn to play and all that, and it destroys a certain amount of individuality. So everybody sacrifices a certain portion of their peculiarity to become a socialized creature, and some of that's good and some of it's bad, and we know that.
Well, gee, then why are you still? If we know that and it's kind of obvious, then why are you telling us? Exactly.
That's the standard story of the rebellious adolescent against society for crushing their individuality, right? And there's an element of that that's true.
So he moved all the way up to adolescent. You know, when you're going through the you know, early life crisis of I ain't getting laid and you know, I got no value and I'm, you know, a piece of shit and, you know, that kind of thing.
But by the same token,
gotta read his notes, I guess.
If you don't sacrifice a certain amount of your individuality to the group, there's no such thing as society. Everybody has to live on their own. Everyone is in their own.
Well, yes, we all know this, don't we? Come on, you know, you don't need to tell anybody a little bit smart that you have to make lots of concessions to exist in a civilization. You got to follow a ton of fucking rules and unwritten and written ones.
Subjective bubble, which is of course now required by this law, and society itself breaks down. And so
again, the threat is society itself is going to break down if we start acknowledging that yes, people are troubled. You know, they're all, you know, this far from Prozac, you know, syndrome, and you know, that finding a way in this world, this crass, putrid, disgusting thing we call a civilization, people are finding it difficult to do it straight, so to speak. So they do it on drugs or they do it on trannyism.
You can't have a society without marginalizing people, or you can't have a society without making everyone, part of everyone, marginalized. And so then when you start to concentrate on the marginalized, it just grows and expands and grows and expands.
Okay, so this grows and expands. So this is the idea that we can do this with sports. Like I said, I made this analogy before, but we can figure out what fairness is in sports. We create umpires. They watch the line. If the ball hits the net, they got a little person that says net. You know. They got little soccer field. They got guys with flags. You kicked him in the nuts. You can't do that. You know, you got hockey, football. All these little referees run around and say, "Ah, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. Can't do that. Play by the rules. Fairness, fairness, fairness. Don't put cork in your bat. No, no, no. Can't put too much pine tar. Can't do this. Can't do that. Play by the rules." We can figure out what a fair game is. So he's saying there's somehow that's not possible in our social circumstance, that we can't find you know, guidelines and rules that make it possible for us to interact and play the game in some kind of reliable way, you know, where you don't get, you know, tied to a fence and people pour lighter fluid on you and catch you on fire because you're a queer.
Grows and expands until everyone becomes marginalized.
And that just highlights a real problem with quote mining. That someone's going to take that. You can't have a society without marginalizing people, quote, and put it under Dr. Jordan Peterson. This is what he believes.
Right, well, that's actually what...
Well, yeah, well, he just said it, jackass. Didn't you? His defeatism was clear. I'm not really interested in trying to fix that problem because somehow that seems like it's too complicated. I can't get a grip on that fairness thing. So we can't make fairness, so let's just live on our privilege and say fuck you to the ones who can't do it our way. You can't wear my pink shirt and my gray suit and have my funky little hair. You're not playing the game right. Nah, 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 nah. I win, you lose. Fuck you.
Derrida said, the most famous of the postmodernists. That's why Derrida is such a invasive force. He said, well, you can't have a society without marginalizing. It's like, well, that's true. It's true, comma, but, ... right? But the fact that you can't have a society without marginalizing doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a society. And it doesn't...
Well, whatever. So again, this we're supposed to somehow concede to this point that we must accept these unnecessary marginalizations, and they're clearly unnecessary. They're just built out of old traditions and silly old bigotries, and they should be rubbed in our society's nose.
Mean that the only reason that society exists is to marginalize, and that was Derrida's claim. That's what makes him so... He's absolutely pathological to the core, Jacques Derrida. And apart from his claims that all we do is trade power games, because that's another one of his claims, his other claim is that the purpose of categorization, the purpose of society is to marginalize, and that's absolutely absurd. The purpose is so that we can all play a moderately mediocre but productive, homogenous social game. Is it perfect? Well, obviously not.
Yes, and shouldn't we, again, the stuff that's not that hard to fix, again, show me the video of how the trannies are just ruining your fucking real world life. Show me how this is just so egregious that, oh man, I couldn't refer to that guy as a girl or whatever. And I had this huge instinct to say, you queer freak. What the fuck? What is your problem?
Does it require the sacrifice of individuality? Yes. Is some of that sacrificed individuality valuable? Absolutely. What's the alternative?
Oh, yeah, it's like, the alternative is you say, guess what? We don't need Klan members. We just don't need them. Fuck them. Let's give them tickets on United Airlines and then beat the shit out of them. Yeah, it'd be fun.
No society. Well, I don't think so. That doesn't seem like a very good alternative to me. Or maybe some sort of egalitarian utopia. Well, yeah, we had 100 years of that. And 100 million deaths as a consequence.
Oh, okay. So the Soviet Union is egalitarian utopia. So that anybody who has any kind of ideals about, oh yeah, you can do a lot better than this slop. 1% owning 70% of the resources. Oh no, anybody who thinks that's not wonderful, oh, they're insane. What a douche.
And so maybe not that either. What we have right now is a flawed system. But it's the best flawed system that anybody's ever come up with.
Oh, well, we hear that all the time, about this best system. The best system is shit. Okay, it could be a lot better. Our democracy could be a lot better. We could have real representation in government. We don't have any of that stuff because of old, stupid, corrupt traditions. Traditions of ownership of the system. And we got to break that. We got to break the two-party system. Break this myopic view of what we have to be. We have to choose one of these, him or her, Democrat, Republican, two completely sold-out institutions that don't have any kind of rational agenda. The right-wing Christian kooks and the money whores, and the government employees and the welfare sluts. Now the foreigners.
And of course it marginalizes people. How could it not? If kids organize themselves in a playground to play hide and go seek, they've marginalized all the kids that wanted to play tag. Obviously. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't come to a consensus and go ahead and play a game. At least they're bloody well playing a game that pretty much everybody has access.
Right, and you're sitting there arguing because you're not winning some kind of political fight, and everybody's not saying fuck the trannies. So what's the point? We're doing that. We're compromising. That's what the whole system is about. And my argument is if you want the compromise to be a better compromise, then yeah, we got to fix the democracy. Because guess what? The reason why it's a broken compromise is because the special interests are writing the compromises. The wings of ideological positions, the fanatics of ideological positions are the ones writing the legislation. The Republicans are too neocon, and the Democrats are too, libosophic.
Access to.
I think marginalized is a lot of times associated with oppression. that term marginalized, and it's not necessarily the case. And I think that society as a whole...
Okay, well, why don't you give us a ton of illustrations of how all these marginalized people aren't really marginalized? So, you know, I'd love for you to live on the street for a while there, Joe.
Civilization is sort of a work in progress. We're working all this out, and that's one of the beautiful things about you being able to discuss these things on your YouTube.
You're working them out by pigeonhole, scapegoating, you know, using the argument from anecdotal crazy example.
Page, as opposed to just having to battle it out inside the echo chamber of the universities. You're able to express this stuff out in the world where people like me that are 49 years old and aren't in college have a chance to read this and see, like, wow, what is this guy going through over there at the University of Toronto? And then you start to...
Yeah, it's going through, it's having this conversation about this theoretical problem that doesn't really fucking exist in anybody's reality except the crazy, paranoid, I'm insecure about my masculinity and I really need Mr. on the form because it makes me feel mystery.
Examine the laws and you start to look at what's going on here, and this egalitarian utopia idea, it's beautiful in its concept that we should all be able to get along and everything should be equal. The problem is it defines...
everything should be fair. Fair. It doesn't have to be equal, it has to be fair. Fair can be done. Again, we do it. We don't inherit the Olympic gold medal. We don't inherit the World Series ring. No, you have to go out and earn it. Let's earn what we are, who we are, what we are.
It's human nature. It defies the 200, 300,000 years of DNA that we have bouncing around inside of our bodies that demand certain types of
You're a little older than that, fella.
Behavior. And I think it's so important that we discuss these things. And I think that society and civilization as a whole, this thing that is ultimately in this growing state.
You know, the silly thing is to even have a conversation about our origins and our genetics and all that kind of stuff, because the growth of our intellect in the last 10,000 years has been ginormous, and of the knowledge base and the facts that we've acquired about even the fact of how we're just machines, just reflexive machines programmed by our little unique adventure, you know, worming through a little bit of, you know, biology and culture, and you know, all of that is so understandable now, so there's no real context for the animal.
This constant state of improvement and objective interaction, and there has to be some sort of discussion. And one of the problems that I have with the so-called social justice warriors and with this movement is that they're enforcing a certain type of thinking and behavior, and they're incredibly aggressive about it, hence the warrior term.
Yeah, well,
right, so they're fighting, and you don't like fighters. Yeah, I don't know. Who's this guy on your shirt? Was he a fighter? Was he fighting for something? You know, it's just stupid. What you don't like is, I guess you feel like you're losing and you have to get desperate about it. Because you really don't have an argument. Your atrocity doesn't exist.
I think a fair bit of that is grounded again in temperament, which is quite comical. I mean, one of the things that our research on political correctness indicated that this trait, agreeableness, is a good predictor of holding politically correct views, and also that being female is a good predictor of holding politically correct views. And I think part of the reason for that, and the warrior aspect to it too, is that...
Okay, so politically correct views would be you don't be a rude cunt. Oh, yeah, it is true. Women are more likely not to be rude cunts. Except the social justice warriors. Isn't that ironic? Gee. The word for paradoxical irony. Like, get a clue. That doesn't make any sense.
Agreeableness is a maternal instinct trait, roughly speaking. And, you know, human beings have very powerful maternal instincts. That's true for women and for men, because men are...
Oh, brother. So he says men have a maternal instinct. An instinct. I mean, something like biological, like some sort of biological thing. From where? From what? I mean, and from what social ape are you going to find any of that in the sense of it's all hierarchy and you know, alpha driven. So, yeah, no, sorry, maternal instinct. genocidal instinct, maybe. Maternal? No.
Very involved. Male human beings are very involved in the raising of their children, which makes them quite different than many large animals.
Yeah, well, again, says you. Human males traditionally haven't been involved at all in the raising of their children. I mean, barely at all. I mean, unless you want to say they went to work and brought home a paycheck and they ate dinner with the kid and said, "Quit picking your nose, you fuck." You know, and then they give them a whap now and then to, you know, "You're cutting the grass crooked, you dumb shit." You know. Some of them got involved in the sense that they slept with their kids, but, you know, I don't know. Yeah, sorry. That just sounds a little laughable to me. Sorry, I just find it a little bit laughable. The traditional male's involvement in family.
On the one hand, if you're very maternal, you're very compassionate and protective of those that are within your kin boundary.
No, you're protective of your possession. It's my bitch, okay? And that be my hole. Yeah, don't touch them. It's in mine. Possessions. Possessions. You ain't divorcing me, bitch. You be my property. Yeah, that kind of bullshit.
And you can try to include more people in that if you want. And that's the political goal. But you're unbelievably hostile to anyone who's outside of that you regard as a threat/predator. And so agreeableness makes you divide the world up into protected children and predators.
And you see that on social justice warriors' Twitter pages. I mean, I follow a bunch of them. I go to them, I watch this.
Yeah, it seems like this is your obsession, right? You just wasted a big, huge chunk of my life just whining and bitching and moaning about something that couldn't be more irrelevant than like if there was a crack in one of these bricks. That's how fucking... Who the fuck could care about this crap? You're really worried about it? It's really going to be a problem in your day-to-day life? Just going to wear you down?
Incredibly supportive, ridiculously so, in terms of like mediocre expressions, tweets. Oh my God, it's so brilliant, and it's like you're saying almost nothing. Yeah. And they're so incredibly supportive of the people that think along their lines, and so incredibly hostile. And this idea of shaming people that don't agree with them, not interacting with them, but almost immediately insulting them, almost immediately marginalizing them, which is ironic.
Oh, gee, yeah, and there's none of that going on any of the other political sides at all, right? There's not like any pile of people doing a bunch of pro-Trump rationalizations.
This is what you see constantly. It's like super supportive and super aggressive against people that have any sort of an opposing viewpoint.
You know, they're all predators, the ones that have an opposing viewpoint.
And that's how they define them.
It's one of the things that's very comical about this, from my perspective, is that...
Oh, yeah, this is just hilarious. I mean, these people think they're not, like, exactly the same kind of fanatic. Amazing.
It's such sex stereotypical behavior. Is that at the same time that the social justice warriors are denouncing the idea that psychology, for example, might have anything to do with sex differences, they're acting out sex stereotype behavior like mad in terms of their persecution of predators and their protection of the kin/in group. So,
and you were a social psychologist.
So that's some kind of sexual thing? Oh, I mean, that just sounds a little bit too Freudian or something. I don't know what the hell he's trying to say there. But clearly you're the repressed type, and they're the... yeah, less oppressed in terms of their own biology.
Psychologist?
No, I'm not. I'm a clinical personality psychologist.
What is the difference?
I'm a clinical personality psychologist. Oh, see? So, I mean, isn't that just saying like a poofter, doofter, loofter, doofter? So he has his own little acronym, acronym, the thingy. He has his own little, what do you call them, pronoun-y thing. His own poofter pronoun. You know. I'm a personality disorder lover, poofter doofter, fufter. Foofter doofters.
Well, one of the differences is that personality and clinical psychology isn't a corrupt enterprise, whereas social psychology fundamentally is. It's been going through an absolute internal revolution over the last 2 years because...
Yeah, that's right. Over the last 2 years, something revolutionary happened. In the field of personality something or other.
Because of its own discovery that many of its fundamental studies and propositions are flawed. I would say social psychology is the most social justice / left-leaning part of psychology.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is such a right-wing loony. Okay, he's got this stupid Marxist paranoia thing going on, and he's talking about social psychology. I mean, it's hilarious. You know, and he's phobic. He's social justice phobic.
And its methods are generally appalling. They're not well documented, and they produce all sorts of categories that don't exist. Whereas personalities, I know it might seem like trivial distinction to people outside of the field, but these disciplines are quite separate.
Yes, outside our specialization. Just like I would find it all kind of trivial, worrying about whether I'm a 3/4 tranny or a 5/8 tranny or a 16/32 tranny. Yeah, I would find that a little bit, who cares?
From a historical perspective, they develop quite separately. Personality psychologists are very, very careful about defining what they measure. And so, for example, I study the big 5 personality traits. That's extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, openness. And under
openness. Openness is a category. I mean, hilarious. Openness? What the fuck is that? That's a personality trait? Oh, man. What does that mean? Loose bowels? I mean, it's just you got a loose brain. I'm open because I don't know whether there's gods or quantum unicorns or periodicity fields.
This false intelligence. These are very well documented. We can really measure them. We can't measure them as well as we would like to. We've identified...
Oh, yes. You can measure them. You haven't measured anything. They didn't measure your suit right. It's all crookedy.
Biological basis for most of the traits. And we understand a fair bit about how they...
Okay, says he. So most of the traits, including openness, have a biological basis. Yeah, that's just super. Yeah, just... Yeah. It must be great to go to college and... Yeah, sorry, I'm just imagining. I'm teaching the course on personality openness.
Make people different. And personality psychologists have been very, very careful about measurement.
Personality psychologists. I don't even understand. Why do you need those 2 words? So why this pronoun, personality psychologist? Where in your little secret Twitter or Tumblr group did you decide, well, let's call ourselves personality psychologists instead of just psychologists? Because most psychology doesn't really have to do with your personality. Most psychology has to do with your mannerisms, maybe. Yes, how affected you are. That's what your personality is. And, what was I talking about? Oh, I'm just having a period of openness. What? Oh, that's right. Yes. So we have our secret little Tumblr meetings just to declare ourselves personality psychologists. I like that. Pooftery dooftery.
Psychologists are, as a general rule, very, very cavalier about their concepts, and that's led to a tremendous...
Yes, you're very possessive and very paranoid. The world's not giving our specialty, the specialness. This is serious business we're doing, this personality psychology. It's really important. This guy's hilarious.
Pollution, I would say, of the psychological literature. The implicit association test is a good example of that. That's the test that's being used to assess people's unconscious biases, unconscious racial biases. And so, for example, if I showed you a bunch of pictures of black people and a bunch of photographs of white people, and then I asked you to associate a good or a bad word with the black people or the white people to respond after you've seen the picture. If you are white and you saw white photos, you'd be faster at responding to the positive words. And so they've used that as evidence of racism. But part of the problem with that is that you can't distinguish it from a novelty response. So
a novelty response? What does that mean? I saw a lot of photos of black people in watermelons, and that's all that is. It's just those watermelon photos just, stuck in my head. And, there's no black people in SpongeBob, and, so I really can't relate because everything is sort of, nexus out of my perception of the world based on how it connects to SpongeBob and, like, South Park doesn't have a whole lot of black people in it either.
Most people in a given racial group are far more familiar with members of their racial group. and the fact that they're more likely to associate negative things with racial groups.
Yes, of course. That's right. Yay! You win the $5 million trophy. And the fact that blacks, by percentage, are more likely to be in poverty and jail. That might have something to do with it, too. Yeah, maybe. A little tiny bit of personality psychology might be involved in that ghetto thing.
That are outside of their racial group isn't something that can be easily distinguished from just a novelty effect. But they make wide...
Novelty. Why would you call it a novelty effect? I mean, you could call it your indoctrination effect. You could call it your socialization effect. You could call it your near neighborhood effect. You know, did you grow up isolated or integrated? Did you get beat up when you were a kid? You know, by them people?
Ranging claims about the inbuilt biases in people, and that's lent impetus to these movements that are racing through corporations across the United States and governmental agencies where people are being subjected to mandatory unconscious racial bias retraining. And there's no evidence, by the way, that...
Yeah, there's no evidence what? That we don't need to do something about the fact that, yeah, it's really unfair. You can't do that judge a man based on the content of his character thing if you're always distracted by the color thing and you're always worried and paranoid. And you give the one guy more of a chance than the other guy. And it's the same thing if, you know, you're hiring somebody to drive your truck and you just keep thinking about how all those woman driver jokes are running through your head, or some other bullshit. And we can acknowledge that these kinds of little crappy prejudices exist in us, and some of them have they're hard to overcome because there's, as a pragmatic fact, there's a correlation. But it's not the individual's fault. And that's the bottom line, and we should recognize that that truth should be more powerful than these other circumstantial facts that aren't that individual's fault.
That works at all. In fact, the evidence that there is suggests quite the contrary.
I saw this on one of your videos. You were discussing how preposterous this is on one of your videos because one of the people that was opposing you was actually a part of something like this, right?
Yeah, well, the human resources and equity people at the University of Toronto have made mandatory...
Okay, human resources and equity people. So it's another acronym, okay, another group, you know, of 3/4 psychologist and 1/4 boner. I mean, what, you know, it's just hilarious when you start to think about all these qualifications people want, all these qualified, and all these segregations and departmentalizations and specialties that are intended to do nothing else but to just make you separate from them. I'm an ethicist.